The arrival. The dark sky above Earth shimmered with a strange light, one that no human eye could ignore. It wasn't the usual glow of stars or satellites. This light was sharp, purposeful, and alive. The object responsible for this glow descended swiftly through the clouds, slicing through the atmosphere like a blade. Inside the sleek, metallic ship stood Zora, an alien warrior from the distant planet of Centauri. She was tall, her silver-toned skin gleaming under the faint glow of her ship's controls. Her eyes, sharp and bright like molten gold, scanned the blue-green planet below. Zora was not just any Xenteran. She was a champion, a soldier of unmatched strength and combat skill. She had traveled across galaxies to prove herself as the greatest warrior in the universe. Earth, to her, was a small and primitive world, weak, fragile, and unworthy of her time. Or so she believed. Yet it was her duty to test them. If Earth's warriors could match her in combat, it would be a revelation to her people. If not, they would merely be another defeated race added to her long list of victories. As her ship landed in the middle of a busy city, Zora prepared herself for what she assumed would be chaos. Her armor shimmered, lightweight yet impenetrable, and her blade, a weapon crafted from the rarest Xenteran crystals, hung by her side. But when the ship's doors opened with a hiss, Zora froze. Humans were everywhere, but instead of fear or awe, they barely seemed to notice her. People walked by, their eyes glued to glowing devices in their hands. A few glanced at the ship, but quickly lost interest, muttering things like, "Another movie shoot," or "must be a drone display." Zora stepped out onto the ground, her boots clanking against the hard pavement. She straightened her back, raised her chin, and let out a commanding roar in her native tongue, one that echoed across the city like thunder. Still, nothing. A child nearby giggled and pointed. "Cool costume, lady." Zora's golden eyes narrowed. Was this how humans reacted to power? On other planets, her arrival brought kings to their knees and armies to the battlefield. But here, she was a spectacle, a curiosity, not a threat. "Enough," Zora muttered to herself, switching to the human language she had studied before her journey. Her voice was sharp and clear as she spoke, amplified by her ship's technology. "People of Earth," she called out, her words echoing across the streets. "I am Zora of Centauri, champion of the 24 galaxies. I challenge your greatest warriors to combat. Prove your strength, or your world will forever be marked as weak and defenseless." Now, people stopped. Phones were raised. Cameras flashed. The crowd grew larger, their murmurs louder. "She's serious," someone whispered. "Is this real?" Another asked, their voice trembling. Zora waited, her heart pounding with anticipation. Surely, now Earth's warriors would step forward, armored, armed, and ready to fight. Yet what followed confused her even more. A man in a bright orange vest walked up to her, a clipboard in hand. "Ma'am," he said calmly, his tone impatient, "you can't park here. This is a no-parking zone. Move your spaceship before the tow truck arrives." Zora blinked, staring at the man as if he were speaking nonsense. "Tow truck," she repeated, the unfamiliar words tasting strange on her tongue. "Yes," the man replied, tapping his clipboard. "Rules are rules. You can't just land, whatever this thing is, in the middle of a street. Now, move it." For the first time in years, Zora felt something unfamiliar, doubt. Her confident demeanor cracked, just slightly. Was this some kind of test? A trick? Were humans trying to throw her off balance before sending their warriors? She turned back to the crowd. "Is there no one here who will face me in battle?" A young man in the crowd shouted. "Battle? Lady, no one fights like that anymore. What are you, from a video game?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Zora's frustration grew. "Do not mock me," she roared, her voice vibrating through the ground. The laughter stopped, replaced by uneasy murmurs. Finally, a voice broke through the noise. "Maybe we should hear her out." The crowd parted, and an older man stepped forward. He was tall and thin, with sharp eyes and a calm expression. His clothes were simple, but there was something commanding about the way he walked. "I'm Dr. Mills," the man said, his voice steady. "You're not here for parking disputes or selfies, are you? You're here for something bigger." Zara studied him, her instincts sharp. This man wasn't like the others. He didn't laugh or dismiss her. He looked at her like he understood her purpose, even if no one else did. "Yes," she said firmly. "I seek your strongest, your greatest. I will test them, and through combat, I will decide if your world is worthy of respect." Dr. Mills smiled faintly. "Combat, huh? You might find that humans are more complicated than you think." Zara frowned. "What do you mean?" The man gestured toward the ship. "Come with me. If you're ready to face a real challenge, I'll show you what humans are capable of." The crowd murmured again, confused and intrigued. Zara hesitated, then nodded. If this was how humans chose to fight, so be it. She would prove herself, no matter what strange tests they had in store. As she followed Dr. Mills into the unknown, one thought lingered in her mind. What if the real challenge wasn't combat at all? The first response. Zara stood tall, her golden eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of a challenger. The humans still hadn't responded with the ferocity she had expected. Instead, they muttered, whispered, and pointed, as if her presence were nothing more than a strange anomaly in their day. She clenched her fists, her patience wearing thin. On her home planet of Centaura, a challenge like this would have drawn hundreds of warriors within moments. Here, there was only hesitation. Just as she prepared to issue another call, a voice cut through the hum of the crowd. "Excuse me, warrior." Zara turned sharply to face the speaker. A man stepped forward, his movements deliberate and calm. He was tall and lean, with thinning gray hair that framed a face marked by years of wisdom. His clothing was simple, an unbuttoned lab coat over a casual outfit, but his piercing gaze and confident posture set him apart from the others. "I am Dr. Mills," he said, his voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "And I think you might be misunderstanding how we handle challenges here on Earth." Zara tilted her head, her expression hardening. "You are the first to step forward. Are you the champion of this world?" Dr. Mills chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Not quite. I'm not a fighter, at least not in the way you're expecting." He gestured toward her with an open hand. "But I might be able to show you something far more interesting than brute strength." Zara narrowed her eyes, suspicious. "If you are not a warrior, then you waste my time. Send me your strongest, or I will take this planet's silence as a declaration of weakness." Dr. Mills didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step closer, his calm demeanor unshaken by her towering presence. "You're expecting fists and weapons. I understand that. But humans are different. If you truly want to measure our strength, you'll need to see beyond your expectations. Let me show you what we're really capable of." The crowd murmured again, intrigued and confused. Zara's gaze flickered between Dr. Mills and the onlookers. Their faces were filled with uncertainty, but also something else. Trust. These humans seemed to believe in this man, though he carried no weapons and showed no signs of combat training. Zara straightened her posture, her voice sharp and commanding. "Very well, Dr. Mills. But if this is a trick," she stepped forward, her golden eyes narrowing. "You will regret wasting my time." Dr. Mills smiled faintly, unfazed by her threat. "No tricks," he assured her. "Follow me." The two of them walked away from the crowd, heading toward a sleek black vehicle parked at the edge of the street. Zara glanced at the machine, its wheels unfamiliar yet primitive compared to the technology she was used to. "This is your transport?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. Dr. Mills opened the door with a smooth motion. "It's not as advanced as your ship, I'm sure, but it gets the job done. Shall we?" Zara hesitated, her instincts warning her against stepping into an unknown machine. But her pride wouldn't allow her to back down. With a curt nod, She ducked into the vehicle, her tall frame barely fitting inside. As the car hummed to life, Zara studied her surroundings. The interior was cramped and minimalist, a stark contrast to the sleek efficiency of Santorin technology. Dr. Mills navigated the streets with practiced ease, the city lights casting fleeting shadows across his face. "You're not what I expected," Zara said, breaking the silence. Dr. Mills glanced at her briefly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "And what did you expect?" "Fear," she replied simply. "Panic. Resistance. Yet your people, they laugh. They take photos. They act as if I'm a curiosity, not a threat." Dr. Mills nodded thoughtfully. "Humans fear what they don't understand, yes. But we also adapt. Quickly. Sometimes, humor is our way of processing the unknown." Zora frowned, unsure if she found his explanation convincing. "And you? Why do you approach me without fear?" "Because I see an opportunity," he said, his tone serious now. "You came here to test us, didn't you? To judge us. Well, that goes both ways. I want to see if someone as powerful as you can handle what makes us truly strong." The car slowed as they reached their destination, a sprawling complex surrounded by high walls and towering structures. The gates opened automatically, revealing a facility that buzzed with energy. Scientists and technicians moved purposefully, their faces illuminated by the glow of screens and machines. Zara stepped out of the car, her sharp gaze scanning the area. This was different from the chaotic streets she had just left. Here, there was order. Focus. Purpose. "What is this place?" she asked. Dr. Mills gestured toward the largest building at the center of the complex. "This is where we push the limits of what's possible. Technology, intelligence, creativity. It all happens here." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "If you think strength is only about muscle and weapons, you're in for a surprise." Zara's curiosity was piqued, though she refused to show it. "And what exactly do you plan to show me, human?" Dr. Mills smiled, a glint of challenge in his eyes. "Come inside, and you'll see." As they entered the facility, Zara felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, anticipation. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure what kind of battle lay ahead. But if Dr. Mills was right, it would be unlike anything she had faced before. And she was ready, or so she thought. The puzzle test. The air inside the facility buzzed with quiet intensity. Zara's sharp eyes darted across the strange devices and glowing screens lining the walls. The humans moved efficiently, typing commands and speaking in hushed tones, yet no one appeared ready to fight. Zara's hand instinctively rested on the hilt of her blade, her patience beginning to wane. Dr. Mills, walking just ahead of her, gestured toward a large steel door at the end of the corridor. It slid open with a faint hiss, revealing a circular chamber bathed in an eerie blue light. In the center stood a platform surrounded by translucent panels that hummed faintly. "This is where your first test begins," Dr. Mills announced, turning to face Zora. Zora frowned, her golden eyes narrowing. "A test. I came for combat, not games." Dr. Mills chuckled, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Strength is one measure of a warrior, yes, but intelligence, adaptability, and strategy are equally important. If you truly want to prove yourself, you'll need to master all of these." Zara bristled at the implication but stepped forward, her pride refusing to let her back down. "What is the challenge?" Dr. Mills gestured toward the platform. "Step onto it, and you'll see." Without hesitation, Zora ascended the platform, her boots clanking against the metallic surface. The panels around her flared to life, forming a three-dimensional grid that floated in midair. Symbols, shapes, and pathways shimmered within the grid, shifting and rearranging themselves in a complex dance. "What is this?" Zara demanded, her hand tightening around her blade. Dr. Mills folded his arms. "It's a puzzle. Your goal is to find the path to the center of the grid, but it's not as simple as it looks. Every wrong move will reset the grid, and make the challenge harder. Zora's eyes narrowed. On Centaura, warriors were trained for battle, not for mental games. Yet she refused to appear weak in front of these humans. The symbols began to glow, their patterns shifting rapidly. Zora studied them, her mind racing to decipher their meaning. Each symbol seemed connected to the others in a way she couldn't immediately grasp. She reached out cautiously, touching one of the glowing pathways. The grid responded with a ripple of light, and for a moment, she thought she was making progress. But then the light dimmed, and the entire grid reset, the symbols rearranging themselves in an even more complicated pattern. A murmur of approval rippled through the observing scientists, but Zora's frustration grew. "This is meaningless," she muttered, her voice laced with irritation. "How does this prove strength?" Dr. Mills, standing calmly outside the chamber, spoke evenly. "A true warrior isn't just someone who fights. It's someone who can think ahead, adapt to the unexpected, and remain calm under pressure. If you can't master this, how will you face challenges that don't rely on brute force?" Zora gritted her teeth but said nothing. She turned back to the grid, her mind sharpening with determination. She wasn't about to let a collection of glowing symbols defeat her. Her sharp eyes tracked the patterns more closely this time, noticing subtle connections between the symbols. Some seemed to pulse in rhythm, while others dimmed when touched. Slowly, she began to understand the logic behind the puzzle. Her hand moved decisively now, touching symbols in a calculated sequence. The grid responded, its glow intensifying as she advanced toward the center. Each step forward required more focus, each move more precise. Zora felt the weight of the challenge pressing on her, but she refused to falter. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, the grid flared with a brilliant light. Zora stood at its center, victorious. The glowing panels dissolved, leaving her alone on the platform. Dr. Mills clapped lightly, a small smile on his face. "Impressive. I wasn't sure you'd figure it out so quickly." Zora stepped off the platform, her expression stern. "It was a distraction, nothing more." Dr. Mills tilted his head, studying her. "Was it? Or did it teach you something about yourself?" Zora opened her mouth to respond but stopped. She wouldn't admit it aloud, but the challenge had forced her to think in ways she hadn't before. On Centaura, strength and speed were all that mattered. Here, the humans were testing something deeper. "Is this all?" she asked, her tone sharp. Dr. Mills shook his head. "Not even close. That was just level 1. Before Zora could respond, the walls of the chamber shifted, revealing a new environment. It was a maze, massive and sprawling, its walls towering above her. The maze shimmered with the same holographic light as the grid, but this time it was littered with moving obstacles and glowing traps. "Your next challenge is to navigate the maze," Dr. Mills said, his voice calm but firm. "But it won't just test your mind. It will test your instincts, your reflexes, and your ability to adapt under pressure." Zora's jaw tightened as she surveyed the maze. She could see the exit far in the distance, but the path to it was fraught with danger. Moving walls, spinning blades, and shimmering barriers that pulsed with energy promised a grueling trial ahead. A small smile tugged at the corner of Zora's lips. Finally, something that required more than just thought. "Good," she said, stepping toward the maze. "Now I can show you what a true warrior is capable of." Dr. Mills watched her with a faint smile as she entered the maze. "Let's see if you can handle it," he murmured. As the walls closed behind her, Zora felt a rush of anticipation. She had conquered the puzzle. Now she would conquer this maze, and prove once again that she was the greatest warrior in the universe. Or so she thought. The human warrior. The maze had been a test of Zora's instincts, agility, and resolve. She emerged from it victorious, though not without struggle. Her silver-toned skin bore faint scratches, and her breath came in steady but deliberate draws. She had underestimated the human's ability to create challenges that required more than just brute strength. As she stepped out of the maze's shimmering holographic walls, she was greeted by Dr. Mills, who stood waiting with his signature calm expression. Beside him was a figure Zara had not seen before, a human clad in loose, unassuming attire, his posture relaxed yet strangely imposing. "Congratulations," Dr. Mills said with a faint smile. "You've completed the maze. But now you face something entirely different." Zara's golden eyes locked onto the man next to Mills. He was tall, with lean muscle evident beneath his simple clothing. His face was calm, almost serene, and his dark eyes carried an intensity that seemed to pierce through her. He didn't carry a weapon, nor did he wear armor, but his presence was enough to set Zara on edge. "This is Kai," Dr. Mills said, gesturing to the man. "One of Earth's finest warriors. He's here to accept your challenge." Zara's lips curled into a smirk. "Finally," she said, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. "Someone brave enough to face me in combat. Tell me, Kai, do you intend to fight barehanded? Or will you use a weapon to make this contest worth my time?" Kai didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, his movements deliberate and fluid. He stood a mere few feet from Zara, his calm gaze meeting her fiery one. "Strength isn't about the weapon you hold," he said quietly, his voice steady and measured. "It's about how you use your mind and body together." Zara's smirk deepened. "Wise words. Let's see if you can back them up." Without waiting for a signal, she drew her blade in one swift motion. The centauran crystal shimmered in the light, its edge sharp enough to cut through solid steel. Zara moved quickly, her speed unmatched by any opponent she had faced before. Her blade sliced through the air, aimed directly at Kai. But to her astonishment, he didn't flinch. Instead, he sidestepped her strike with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. His movements were minimal, precise, and efficient, as though he had anticipated her every move. Zara's eyes narrowed. She adjusted her stance and lunged again, her blade a blur of motion. This time, she added feints to her attack, testing his reflexes. But once again, Kai evaded her strikes with ease. He didn't attack. He simply moved, dodging her blade as if it were a dance. "Is this how humans fight?" Zara growled, her frustration mounting. "Running and dodging. Stand and face me." Kai's calm expression didn't waver. A true warrior doesn't fight recklessly. They wait for the right moment. Zara's patience snapped. She unleashed a flurry of attacks, each more aggressive than the last. Her blade sang through the air, but no matter how fast or precise her strikes, Kai was always one step ahead. His movements were almost hypnotic, a combination of martial skill and unshakable focus. Finally, Kai made his move. As Zara's blade came down in a powerful arc, he stepped inside her guard, his hand shooting out like lightning. With a quick, controlled motion, he grabbed her wrist and twisted it just enough to disarm her without causing injury. The blade clattered to the ground. Zara's eyes widened in shock. Before she could react, Kai stepped back, his stance still relaxed, his expression calm. "You rely too much on your weapon," he said simply. "Without it, what are you?" For the first time in her life, Zara was at a loss for words. She bent to retrieve her blade, but Kai raised a hand. "You won't need that," he said. "If you want to truly understand Earth's warriors, you'll have to fight like we do. No weapons, no armor, just skill." Zara's pride urged her to reject his offer, to prove that she was superior with or without her blade. But a deeper part of her, the part that sought growth and challenge, saw this as an opportunity. Slowly, she straightened and let her blade fall to her side. "Very well," she said, her voice low and steady. "Teach me." Kai nodded, his calm expression giving way to a faint smile. "Then let's begin." What followed was unlike any combat Zara had ever experienced. Kai's movements were precise and measured, his strikes controlled and efficient. He used her own momentum against her, redirecting her attacks with minimal effort. Every time she thought she had found an opening, he countered with a move so simple yet effective that it left her stunned. By the time their sparring ended, Zara was on one knee, breathing heavily. Kai stood a few feet away, his breathing steady, his stance as calm as ever. "You're strong," Kai said, his voice devoid of arrogance. "But strength isn't everything. Combat is about balance, between mind, body, and spirit. That's what we humans understand." Zara looked up at him, her pride wounded but her respect for him undeniable. For the first time, she realized that Earth's warriors weren't weak. They were simply different, and in their difference lay a strength she had never encountered before. Dr. Mills stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Now you see why we don't always rely on weapons and brute force. Humanity's greatest strength lies in our ability to adapt, to learn, and to grow." Zara rose to her feet, her gaze fixed on Kai. "This isn't over," she said, her voice firm but lacking the arrogance it had before. "I will face you again. And next time, I will be ready." Kai inclined his head in acknowledgement. "I look forward to it." As Zara left the chamber, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. For the first time in her life, she felt something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't defeat, it was a challenge, one that she was determined to meet head-on. The emotional test. Zara sat alone in a quiet chamber, her breathing steady as she processed the events of her last battle. Kai had bested her without landing a single strike. His mastery over combat had shaken her understanding of strength, forcing her to see a new side of humanity. Yet it wasn't enough. She needed to understand why these humans, with their seemingly fragile bodies, possessed such unyielding confidence and resilience. The door to the chamber slid open with a soft hiss. Dr. Mills entered, carrying a small rectangular device that glowed faintly in his hand. "You've experienced our physical strength and strategy," he began, his voice calm and measured. "But to truly understand humanity, you need to see what drives us." Zara's golden eyes followed the device as Dr. Mills placed it on the table before her. "Another test?" she asked, her voice steady but wary. "Not a test," Dr. Mills replied. "A lesson." Zara's brow furrowed. She hated the sound of that word. Lessons were for children, for those who lacked knowledge. She was a warrior, a champion. Yet something in Dr. Mills' tone held her curiosity. Reluctantly, she nodded. Dr. Mills tapped the device, and the air around them shimmered. A holographic projection materialized, engulfing the room in a vivid three-dimensional display. The scene that unfolded was unlike anything Zara had encountered in her intergalactic travels. The hologram showed Earth in its earliest days, primitive humans huddled in caves, their faces marked by fear and hunger. Zara watched as they struggled to light a fire, their hands trembling in the cold. When they succeeded, their joy was palpable, a small victory against the overwhelming forces of nature. "Humans began with nothing," Dr. Mills explained, his voice echoing softly through the room. "No claws, no fangs, no armor. We were prey, not predators. But we survived because of something you can't measure with strength alone." The scene shifted, showing ancient humans working together to build shelters, hunt, and protect one another from predators. Zara observed their determination, their ingenuity. They were fragile, yes, but their unity gave them a strength that was undeniable. "Unity," Zara muttered, the word foreign on her tongue. Dr. Mills nodded. "Exactly. Alone, we were weak. Together, we became something more." The hologram transformed again, this time showing scenes of conflict and war. Humans fought against impossible odds, facing enemies far more powerful than themselves. Zara saw armies standing against towering war machines, individuals sacrificing themselves to protect others, and moments of courage in the face of certain death. Zara's jaw tightened. "You glorify war. You are no different from the species I've defeated." "Look closer," Dr. Mills said, his tone firm but patient. The hologram zoomed in on moments of compassion amidst the chaos. A soldier shielding a child from harm, enemies laying down their weapons to help the wounded, survivors rebuilding together after destruction. These weren't displays of strength or violence. They were acts of humanity. Zara's hand clenched into a fist. The images stirred something inside her, something she couldn't name. On Centaura, there was no place for emotion in battle. Warriors fought, won, and moved on. Yet here, she saw that humans didn't just fight. They felt. Their strength came from something deeper than muscles or strategy. "What is this?" she asked, her voice low. "Why show me your weaknesses?" Dr. Mills looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Because what you see as weakness is our greatest strength. Our ability to care, to protect, to sacrifice for others. That's what makes us strong. It's not just about surviving. It's about finding meaning in that survival." The hologram changed again, fast-forwarding through Earth's history. Zara watched as humans built great cities, created art and music, and reached for the stars. They faced disasters, wars, and plagues, yet they always found a way to rise again. Finally, the projection settled on a single image, a group of humans standing together, their faces different but united by a shared purpose. The glow of Earth's blue horizon framed them, a testament to their resilience. Zara's gaze lingered on the image. For the first time, she felt a pang of something unfamiliar, an ache in her chest that wasn't physical. It wasn't pain, exactly, but it was powerful. She turned to Dr. Mills, her voice quieter than before. "Why show me this now? What does it prove?" "It proves that strength isn't just about what you can take," Dr. Mills said. "It's about what you can give. Humans are fragile, yes, but we endure because we fight for something greater than ourselves." Zara looked away, her thoughts swirling. On Centaura, warriors were revered for their victories, for their ability to dominate. Yet here, she saw a species that found strength in connection, in vulnerability. It was a concept she had never encountered before, and it unsettled her. Dr. Mills stepped closer, his tone softening. "You came here to judge us, to test us. But perhaps in the process, you're discovering something about yourself." Zara's head snapped back to him, her eyes blazing. "Do not presume to know me, human." "I don't," Dr. Mills admitted. "But I do know this. Strength without purpose is empty. You're searching for something, Zara. Maybe it's time you ask yourself what that is." The hologram faded, leaving the room in silence. Zara stood still, her mind racing with questions she wasn't ready to confront. Dr. Mills watched her for a moment before turning to leave. "You'll face more challenges," he said as he reached the door. "But none will be as difficult as understanding what truly drives you." As the door slid shut behind him, Zara remained in the quiet chamber, her reflection staring back at her from the polished surface of her blade. For the first time in her life, the champion of Centaura felt uncertain. Not about her strength, but about her purpose, the final challenge. The air inside the massive arena was electric, charged with an energy Zara couldn't quite define. The space was unlike any battlefield she had encountered, circular, vast, and pulsating with light and sound. Holographic displays lined the walls, projecting images of Earth's diverse landscapes. Jungles, deserts, oceans, and cities. Each one seemed to hum with the promise of a new trial. Zara stood at the center, her silver-toned skin gleaming under the overhead lights. She had faced many challenges since her arrival on Earth, tests of mind, body, and emotion. Each had shaken her confidence in ways she hadn't expected. But now, she felt ready. Whatever this final challenge was, she would prove herself once and for all. Dr. Mills entered the arena, his calm demeanor unchanged. Beside him stood Kai, the human warrior who had bested her in combat. Zara's golden eyes flickered toward him, her pride still bruised from their encounter. Yet, beneath her frustration, she felt a grudging respect. Kai had shown her a strength that went beyond weapons and physicality. "This is it," Dr. Mills said, his voice carrying through the arena. "Your final challenge. It's not just about you, Zara. It's about what you've learned." Zara frowned, her hand instinctively brushing the hilt of her blade. "What do you mean?" Dr. Mills gestured toward the holographic displays. "This challenge will test everything: your strength, your intellect, and most importantly, your ability to work with others. You've proven you can fight alone. Now let's see if you can fight together." Before Zara could respond, the ground beneath her shifted. The smooth surface of the arena morphed, transforming into a dense jungle. Trees sprouted upward, their canopies blocking out the overhead lights. The hum of holographic projectors filled the air, and suddenly, Zara was no longer in the sterile arena, but in the heart of a simulated rainforest. She turned to Dr. Mills, but he and Kai were gone. In their place stood three humans: a young woman in a pilot's jumpsuit, a burly man with mechanic's tools strapped to his belt, and a wiry figure holding a medical kit. They looked at Zara nervously, their eyes darting between her and the simulated jungle. "What is this?" Zara demanded, her voice sharp. The pilot stepped forward, her tone cautious but firm. "We're your team," she said. "This challenge isn't about fighting enemies. It's about survival. And we'll need to work together to make it through." Before Zara could protest, a deafening roar echoed through the jungle. The trees trembled, and the ground quaked beneath their feet. The humans tensed, their eyes scanning the shadows for the source of the sound. "Move," the mechanic barked, pointing toward a narrow path. "We need to find shelter before it finds us." Zara hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to stand her ground and fight whatever threat loomed in the jungle. But the humans were already moving, their actions coordinated and purposeful. Gritting her teeth, Zara followed, her pride chafing at the idea of running. The group moved swiftly through the dense foliage, their path lit by faint beams of holographic sunlight. Zara noticed how the humans worked together seamlessly, the pilot scouting ahead, the mechanic clearing obstacles, and the medic ensuring everyone kept pace. Their teamwork was unlike anything she had seen before. On Centaura, warriors competed for glory, each seeking to outshine the other. Here, the humans acted as one, their survival dependent on their unity. As they reached a clearing, the ground beneath them trembled again. A massive creature burst through the trees, its form a terrifying blend of claws, fangs, and shimmering scales. The holographic beast was designed to test their limits, and it succeeded immediately. Zara felt her pulse quicken at the sight of it. The pilot raised a hand, signaling the group to halt. "We need a plan," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "That thing's too big to take head-on." Zara stepped forward, her blade gleaming in the sunlight. "I can handle it." The mechanic shook his head. "Not alone. You can't. Look at its size. We need to outsmart it, not outmuscle it." Zara opened her mouth to argue but stopped. The humans weren't cowering in fear. They were strategizing. Despite their obvious disadvantage, they remained calm, their minds focused on finding a solution. "Fine," Zara said, lowering her blade slightly. "What's the plan?" The pilot outlined a strategy. Zara would serve as the distraction, drawing the creature's attention while the mechanic and medic worked to disable it using traps they could quickly assemble from the jungle's resources. It was a bold, risky plan, but it relied on everyone playing their part perfectly. The plan was set into motion. Zara charged at the creature, her blade flashing as she dodged its massive claws. She moved with precision, her speed and agility keeping her just out of reach. Meanwhile, the humans worked frantically in the background, the mechanic rigging a makeshift trap, while the medic gathered supplies to treat potential injuries. As the creature lunged toward Zara, the pilot gave the signal. Zara dodged at the last second, leading the beast directly into the trap. A hidden snare snapped around its leg, and a barrage of energy pulses from a nearby device immobilized it temporarily. The group rushed to Zara's side as the creature roared in frustration, its movements slowed by the trap. The pilot placed a hand on Zara's shoulder, her expression filled with relief. "We did it." Zara stared at the humans, her chest heaving from exertion. She had fought countless battles, faced enemies stronger and faster than this creature. But this was the first time she had fought as part of a team. The victory felt different. It wasn't hers alone. It was theirs. As the jungle simulation faded, the arena returned to its original form. Dr. Mills and Kai stood waiting, their expressions unreadable. "Well done," Dr. Mills said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "You didn't just survive, you thrived. Together." Zara looked at the humans beside her, their faces glowing with triumph. For the first time, she felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name, a sense of connection, of belonging. Kai stepped forward, his calm gaze meeting hers. "Now you see, strength isn't about standing alone. It's about standing together." Zara didn't respond immediately. She sheathed her blade, her mind racing with the implications of what she had just experienced. For the first time in her life, she began to question everything she had been taught. "Perhaps," she said finally, her voice quiet but resolute, "there's more to strength than I realized." Dr. Mills nodded, a small smile on his lips. "Welcome to humanity, Zara." Zara's revelation. The sun was setting over the sprawling human city, its golden light painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Zara stood atop a high observation deck, the cityscape stretching out before her. The hum of life below, cars, chatter, and the occasional burst of laughter, was a far cry from the battle cries and disciplined drills she had grown up with on Centaura. Yet, in its own way, it was just as powerful. Behind her, the soft sound of footsteps drew her attention. Zara turned to see Dr. Mills and Kai approaching, their expressions calm but expectant. She had grown used to their presence, though she would never admit how much she valued their insights. "Admiring the view?" Dr. Mills asked, his tone light. Zara nodded, her golden eyes scanning the horizon. "It's different," she said after a moment. "Your world is chaotic, noisy. Yet there is beauty in it." Dr. Mills smiled. "Chaos and beauty often go hand in hand. That's part of what makes us human." Zara's gaze shifted to Kai, who stood silently, his calm demeanor as unshakable as ever. She had learned much from him, more than she cared to admit. His ability to balance strength with wisdom, to fight without aggression, had left a mark on her. He had shown her a kind of power that went beyond physical combat. "You've changed," Kai said quietly, his voice cutting through the stillness. Zara's brow furrowed. "I have not," she replied, though the words felt hollow even to her. Kai simply smiled. "You have. And that's not a weakness. It's growth." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden blare of alarms. The sky, once peaceful, was now alight with a deep red glow. Zara's head snapped upward, her warrior instincts immediately on high alert. "What is that?" she demanded. Dr. Mills' face darkened as he pulled a small device from his pocket. The holographic display showed an incoming object, a massive ship descending rapidly through Earth's atmosphere. Its design was sleek and ominous, far more advanced than anything humans had built. Kai's jaw tightened. "That's not one of ours." Zara's heart sank as she recognized the ship's design. "It's Centaran," she said grimly. "One of our warships." Dr. Mills looked at her, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "What are they doing here?" Zara's fists clenched. "They must have followed me. They don't take kindly to challenges that remain unresolved. If they're here, it means one thing. They see Earth as a threat." The warship descended swiftly, its engines roaring as it hovered above the city. A beam of light shot down, and moments later, a group of Centaran warriors materialized in the heart of the city square. Their armor gleamed, and their weapons hummed with energy. At their head was General Korak, a towering figure with silver-toned skin and a gaze as sharp as a blade. Zara's breath caught in her throat. Korak was a legend among her people, a commander known for his ruthlessness and unyielding loyalty to Centaran's superiority. "You've brought them here," Kai said, his tone steady but firm. Zara shook her head, frustration and guilt gnawing at her. They would have come eventually. I was sent to judge your strength. They're here to make their own judgment. As Zara, Dr. Mills, and Kai approached the square, Korek's gaze fell on her. His expression was cold, calculating. Zara, he said, his voice booming. You were sent to evaluate this planet's warriors. Yet you remain here, unchallenged, unvictorious. Explain yourself. Zara stepped forward, her back straight and her voice steady. These humans are not what we expected, General. They are not weak. Their strength lies in ways we have overlooked. Korek's eyes narrowed. You speak as if you've been swayed by them. Have you forgotten who you are? I have not forgotten, Zara replied, her tone sharp. But I have learned. They possess a strength we cannot measure by our standards. They fight for each other, not for glory. They survive through unity, not domination. It is a strength worth respecting. Korek sneered. Words of a traitor. If they are as strong as you claim, they will prove it in combat. Otherwise, we will destroy this planet to preserve our honor. Zara's heart pounded. She knew they'd sent her in way. There was no room for negotiation. Yet as she looked at the humans around her, she realized she couldn't allow her people to harm them. She had seen their courage, their resilience. She had seen their humanity. No, Zara said firmly, stepping between Korek and the humans. If you want a battle, you'll face me first. The square fell silent. Korek's eyes blazed with fury, but he nodded. Very well. Prove your loyalty, Zara. If you win, I will spare this world. If you lose, it will burn. The fight was swift and brutal. Korek was a seasoned warrior, his strikes precise and powerful. But Zara fought with a fire she had never felt before. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the humans she had come to respect, for the lessons they had taught her. In the end, Zara emerged victorious, her blade at Korek's throat. She stared into his eyes, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. This planet is under my protection. If you want it, you'll have to go through me. Korek hesitated, then lowered his weapon. You've changed, he said, his tone laced with disdain. I have, Zara replied, and I am stronger for it. As the Centauran ship retreated, the humans erupted in cheers. Zara stood amidst them, her heart heavy yet filled with a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time in her life, she understood that strength wasn't about domination. It was about protecting what mattered. Dr. Mills and Kai approached her, their expressions proud. You've done more than protect this world, Dr. Mills said. You've found your place in it. Zara nodded, a small smile gracing her lips. Perhaps humanity has taught me more than I expected. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Zara looked to the stars. She had come to Earth as a conqueror, but she was leaving as something far greater, a defender, a learner, and perhaps a part of something much larger than herself.